Good morning, everyone. My name is Gina Buckles. I'm one of the advisors at 401k Plan Professionals, and we're very happy that we can bring you this webinar. It's always very well attended. We have a huge audience today. I do want to acknowledge that in years past, we have always had a representative from the Social Security Administration doing this webinar. Because of staff cuts, shortage in staff, they don't have the capacity to provide this outreach and this education. So that's unfortunate, but we're very fortunate that we were able to find some great speakers through our friends at MFS Investments. So that's the good news. And I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. But first, just a couple of housekeeping items. This presentation today is scheduled for an hour. The presentation itself is going to be about 35 to 40 minutes. We're going to leave a lot of time for questions. So yes, questions important. Thank you to those of you who submitted those questions in advance. We're going to make sure we answer all of those questions. Please use the Q&A to submit any questions throughout the presentation. Again, we will also stay on as long as we need to make sure all the questions are answered. Is this recorded? Absolutely. Yes, it is recorded. You can watch it 15 times if you want. All of our webinars are recorded. They're out on our website and our YouTube channel, which is 401k Plan Professionals. So it will be out there. If you are registered today, you are going to receive a recorded link anyway. But again, if you can't find it, it's on our website. Worst case scenario, you can email somebody on our team. We'll make sure you get the recording. There's also going to be a number of other resources available to you. MFS has some great FAQs. We're going to make sure you know where to submit questions afterwards. So definitely make sure you have a lot of resources. So don't worry about that. And last thing I want to mention before I introduce Zach and Jack. I just got back from Washington, D.C. last night. Every July, I go to an industry conference. We talk about retirement savings legislation. In Washington, D.C., we get to meet with a lot of people, Capitol Hill. And of course, one of the things we talked about was Social Security. Obviously, it's a big topic. And I'm sure this isn't a surprise to you, but Social Security is underfunded. It is underfunded to the tune of $26 trillion a year. So it's an astonishing number. Most estimates will say it's going to be insolvent by the year 2033, possibly even earlier. What does insolvency mean? It doesn't mean it's broke. It doesn't mean it went to zero, because we're constantly paying into the Social Security system. What it means is at that time, we cannot meet our benefit obligations to people on Social Security benefits. One thing that was good news is I do think we collectively heard from these policymakers and insiders that they're probably not going to cut benefits. Good luck to the politician that wants to run on that campaign promise. We're going to cut Social Security benefits. It is too important, and there are too many people who depend on Social Security. So at least not for those in collecting benefits and those approaching retirement. But we have to come up with a resolution, which may entail raising taxes, raising the Social Security wage limit, raising the age you collect Social Security, even expanding our national debt. Probably not a great idea, but there has to be a resolution. So my recommendation is listen, keep your eyes and ears open, because the next presidential election, 2028, they're going to have to tackle this issue. We cannot kick the can down much further. So keep your eyes and ears open, listen. There's going to be a lot more on Social Security. So anyway, with that introduction, I'm excited to introduce Zach and Jack. Zach has been with MFS Investment Management Company since 2018. He is a great resource to advisor teams like us. He is extremely well educated and knowledgeable on Social Security. He's literally done hundreds of these presentations, probably fielded, I don't know, tens of thousands of questions on Social Security. So Zach is going to take us through the presentation today. Also, I want to thank his colleague, Jack Wood. Jack has also been with MFS investment management since 2019. He has a very similar role, again, also very well educated in topics like Social Security and other participant financial wellness topics. So Jack is going to be kind of behind the scenes, looking at Q&A, answering the questions. Jack and I are going to be staying on as long as you need us to make sure we get all of those questions answered. Anyway, Zach and Jack, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, our pleasure, Gina. What an intro. I always joke that starting off with the insolvency issue is opening a can of worms when you're doing a group seminar. But I think all the notes that you pointed out from what you gathered out of that DC meeting is exactly what we would express on today's call. A lot of people get confused with that scary headline of insolvency, right? We know how media companies make their money. They want clicks to sell their advertisements. So the more threatening they can sound in those headlines saying your Social Security trust fund is running dry, the more they'll try to sound like that, right? So, but if anybody remembers, if they were around, or if you do a quick search of history back towards the Reagan administration, a lot of that jargon around trust fund running dry and insolvency is a very much what we're hearing today, right? And they made some changes back then that we're going to briefly discuss. But to your point, Gina, you mentioned a couple of the ways that they changed it back then, but they could possibly do similar ways, including hiring, lengthening the income threshold of what the payroll tax is taken from, as well as pushing full retirement age back. So there's a couple of ways that they can push that insolvency issue. And when people do ask me, hey, well, who should I pay attention to for changes like that? To your point, the presidential election in 2028 will definitely have some type of maybe bipartisan issue pushing solutions. And then, of course, the 2030 congressional cycle, because those actual politicians elected during those cycles will be the ones co-sponsoring, signing off on bills that would possibly make that change before the insolvency date, which right now is about estimated towards mid-year 2035. Okay. And to help maybe those soften the pillow at home, to help get a better rest tonight and future nights, if you're thinking about it, Congress usually, should we say notoriously or famously, they do make, when they do adjust major congressional acts, they usually amend them to grandfather in those that have that expectation of receiving those social programs. So I would rest assured that if you're maybe 50 to 55 or older today, that benefit should be there for you in whole on what you're expecting to and what you've paid into your whole life. But to get away from that can of worms, the way I usually introduce myself to these calls, as Gina already did kindly for me and Jack, is people usually say through the elephant of the room is, why is some 30-year-old kid doing lecturing on that topic of Social Security? It honestly came through a personal hobby of mine or a personal connection through family members. My aunt and uncle actually filed for their benefit a couple years ago. They subjected themselves to what's called the earnings limit or earnings test, which we will cover today. But they had checks withheld from them. I'm the finance person of the family. They're not going to go to my two older brothers, which one spends about 8 hours a day under the hood of a car, and the other spends about 8 hours a day underground laying cable for Comcast. So I don't know what help for them that they would be able to go to them for Social Security. So they came to me because I'm the only one that actually works for a finance company. But I had no answers for them. Right. And knowing that 2 years fast forward to this year that my parents would be filing for their benefit, which they actually are in December, I knew, hey, I should probably take this upon myself to learn if I'm going to be that help to my immediate, but also my extended and friends as well through my family. So I tell that story to address that elephant in the room, but also to tell the people on the call that if you're under 50 years old and maybe not eligible to claim your benefit for another 10 or plus years, I still want this to be applicable to you. And you never know at the end of the day who you're ultimately going to help with this information. So that's usually how I like to kick things off. But typically, the way people kick things off when it comes to their benefit is they either logged onto their account for the first time on ssa.gov, or they received their statement, which typically comes about 10 years before your first eligibility to claim a benefit. So usually around that 50 to 52 age is where you'll get your first statement paper in the mail. And then logging in online, just so you know, there are two separate login methods that they changed last summer. They're both through ssa.gov, but just know that they both will get you the information you need from Social Security. But to better explain, one is just for Social Security benefits, and the other login is for all government entities, which of course includes Social Security. But what people typically do, right, which I definitely did when I got into my account, because why not, is they're essentially going to go right to that benefit amount, what they're going to get at full retirement age. And that's what Social Security calls PIA, or your primary insurance amount. And again, your dollar amount at full retirement age. Now, they are based on estimates, but if you look continuing into the second and third page, you'll see bracketed out year by year all the income you've paid in, right? So even though your full retirement age is based off of estimates that you continue to do what you're doing, you can whip out the calculator and start playing with some math like I did and have some fun trying to figure out what your benefit would be. Now, what's usually skipped over and what we feel is some of the most important takeaways from your statement, other than, of course, the dollar amount you're going to get, is what we cherry picked right in the right-hand corner of your screen. And that is, your benefit is not intended to be your only source of income when you retire. So for everyone on the call today, there's going to be several things that factor into that, right? Some of us may have pensions, 401ks from past employers. Maybe we have IRAs. Maybe we have major assets that we plan on selling, or collecting passive income through a rental property or something going into retirement. All of those, of course, are going to factor in, and why we always advise that that's certain age of when you hit 50 to 55, it is crucial to meet with a financial professional and an advisor. Because I don't know what advisor, the best one on the planet, can do for you if you approach them in the year you're taking your benefit, to help better prepare for that decision. But if you were to approach an advisor 10 years before making that decision, I think there's good odds that they can do what's best that they can do to put your situation best foot forward to plan when you take that benefit. Now, of course, we're only teed about to talk about the Social Security component. So that's what we're going to address. And diving into the agenda, we're going to talk about your benefit, right? Eligibility, calculation of that. We're going to try to keep that uniform as we talk about the different benefits, right? Including those for anyone that's been married, couples and divorcees. And then last, which is everyone's favorite to ask questions about, which full disclosure on those CPA, but we're going to have fun with the taxes and the role that taxes play with your benefit as well. So going right in to your benefit. So I did label 5 key gold slides going through the presentation. We're going to land ourselves on the first key gold slide with this one. I really feel like with all the information we're going to cover today, knowing those 5 key gold slides and the topics on those are going to help us plan the best. So first key gold slide, know your full retirement age. Okay. Now, usually if I'm in a live setting, I would do, hey, quick raise a hand. Who knows the last time this full retirement age was changed? Obviously, we can't do that on a virtual call, but I'll just give you that information. It was during the Reagan administration. And to that point I made earlier on the call, it's now just being finalized. And what I mean by that, in 2 years, people are still aging off the 66 to 67 switch. And in 2 years, 2027, everyone's full retirement age will be 67. So if we think about the impact of changes like pushing the full retirement age and allowing grandfathered in demographics like Reagan did, you can understand how long those changes can actually take effect. So even though a change like that could happen in the next 10 years, I would not sweat the fact that if I'm 67 as my full retirement age, I would bet that the next 10, maybe even 15 years of date of birth people will be 67, and then a gradual increase maybe to 68 for those 30, 40 years out, like we're finding ourselves in today. Now, of course, everyone take a quick look. Everyone will be at least 66 or 8 months if you're not full retirement age yet. But know what your full retirement age is, because so many calculations are based on or off of it. Knowing your age and the amount you're getting at that age is going to be the first key point on planning your benefit. Then we can look at the impacts of claiming before or after. But to start for the eligibility right at the top, you do need 40 quarters to qualify for your benefit. And yes, that's a fancy way of saying 10 years of earned income, paying into Social Security. Now, those don't include consecutive years, right? So perhaps you took a few years off to care for a newborn child. Just know if you don't have a 35 years total paying into the program, that zeros will be in your average score. Okay. Then obviously on screen, we take at the impacts of before and after claiming of your full retirement age for the benefit. Now we can see the reduction all the way from 62 to 63 and so on, 100% at 67, and then the 8% year over year once you turn 67 or older. Now, those 8% year over year does include inflation adjustment. So that's what Social Security calls the COLA, or the cost of living adjustment, that is enacted year over year as long as inflation is impacted year over year on the economy. So that is in addition to that. Now, a usual common question when I go over the pluses or minuses of your benefit is, Zach, why don't I just take my benefit right away? Right? At 62, start collecting, yes, reduced, but what if I just invest those assets instead? Can't I get more from a total return perspective from Social Security if I took it right away and invested versus letting it grow naturally? Now, I will say it's possible. I don't know if Gina's putting her forehead on her desk right now, or palming her head saying, why would you say that, Zach? Because that's more work for me. It always depends on case by case. So I will always say, if you're thinking about a decision like that, 100% of times approach your financial advisor, because everyone's going to be different. And of course, is going to include those outside assets we briefly discussed and how those come into play with taking your benefit. Now, if we extrapolated any hard data or studies that have been done on this, then what we can say is that from a study in 2023, the Journal of Financial Planning went back 100 years of market returns, and they asked those questions. Can I take it right away and invest instead, or let it grow naturally? And in around an 80% of all cases, so yes, it is possible, but in 80% of all cases, they said it was best to just let it grow naturally. The few bullet points they came out on why, with a social engineering take as well, is one, is actually very tough to beat the 8% year over year plus inflation adjustment that you get naturally with Social Security. Now, a stock or bond or mutual fund, right, it might return more than 8% in a given year, but your profits might reflect slightly different returns because you're perhaps dollar cost averaging, right, month after month, every time you get the check, instead of just, say, a lump sum investment at the start of the year. Now, additionally to that, to match that growth, individuals would usually have to invest a little bit more riskier than what their age-based or just what their overall risk tolerance would suggest for themselves at that time. And then lastly, which is more of that social engineering or behavioral take, they found it a lot easier for individuals to budget their post-retirement income on a fixed dollar amount, right, than on a investment with a hope of return, right? Think about the stress relieving of that alone. You know what you're going to get month to month with Social Security. You don't know what you're going to get if you invest it and let the economy ride with your investments. So a little bit more of a social engineering take on why they said that. But what that tells to me overall is, because there's so many factors, claiming your benefit is not going to be just straight up an age-based decision, right? It's going to be more situational based. So anytime we approach the planning of this, we ask important questions like, are you working? Are you married, widowed, divorced? What's your tax situation, right? So going into more of those plannings, and why perhaps we ask that question right out of the gate of, are you working, is, well, we can all thank my aunt and uncle for this slide, or why I'm here today, because they messed this up. And that's why I took it on by myself to learn the topic. But why we ask that question first, are you working, is exactly this. There is a limit to how much you can earn once you take your benefit before full retirement age. Okay. This is our second key gold slide. Earnings limit affects everyone before full retirement age, and it doesn't matter what benefit we discuss. If it's your own benefit, if it's a spousal or survivor, a divorce, disability benefits, all of those are affected by this earnings limit. Okay. Now, it's only going to look at gross wages, right? So unearned income, think things like pensions, IRAs, rental income, not included on this test. And then, of course, it's only going to look at those gross wages when you turn your benefit on before full retirement age. Excuse me. Once you turn full retirement age, go ahead and rip up this page like your dog did your sixth grade homework. It is no longer going to apply. Okay. Social Security does not care how much money you make while collecting after you turn full retirement age. All right. And then additionally, that if you are married, it's only going to look at the individual, right? Not both of you, regardless if you're filing jointly or filing separate, married. It's only going to look at the individual collecting their benefit. Okay. Now, Once we figure out the eligibility for your own, how it's calculated, and those common mistakes made, let's go over options for married couples. So in addition to your own retirement benefit, if you've ever been married, you may receive up to 50% of your spouse's benefit at full retirement age. To keep this uniform, right, as we go from benefit to benefit, we're going to start with that eligibility. So how do I know I'm eligible for a spousal benefit? Three major requirements. One, I'm sure a lot of us can probably guess the first requirement, and it's you have had to have been married. Okay. And then when you go take that benefit, your marriage has to be at least in place for 1 year when you go to claim. Second rule, your spouse must also be getting their benefit to get one off of them. And then third, you have to be age 62 or older. Now, there are some exceptions to that age that we can always discuss, if any, in questions. Now, once we work out you're eligible, how do they then calculate that benefit? Well, remember that first key goal slide? I said know your full retirement age and that benefit that's assigned to that age. Well, now's that moment in the presentation. You can give a little nudge to your significant other if you're watching with them, to ask if they were paying attention. And why? Because the spousal benefit off of them is going to be based on whatever they're going to get at full retirement age. Okay. You then take that dollar amount and then you're going to multiply it by the percentage, as you see on your screen, with the age that corresponds with your age when you take that benefit. Okay. Now, a couple things to note is if that both you and your spouse worked and were both eligible for Social Security on your own, know that you can't start with one or the spousal and then switch. Okay. That was an old method that Social Security threw in the trash can about 8 years ago. Everyone's grandfathered out of that now. So you can no longer start with your own or the spousal and make the switch. What Social Security is going to do is they're just going to give you the highest benefit of the two. So either whatever that 32.5 to 50% of the spouses or that 70 to 100% of your own, whichever's higher you're going to get. Okay. And then additionally, the differences in eligibility, we're going to talk versus survivor on a future slide. But since we now talked about the eligibility and then how it's calculated, let's bring up a quick case study to give it more real life context. So here we have a little ditty about Jack and Diane. Hopefully those two names ring a bell, right? Two American kids growing up in the heartland. The popular John Mellencamp song, I hope everyone's familiar with, but we're going to throw a little twist on it. So the twist we're saying is Diane is the star athlete, right? She's the higher earner. And then Jack's going to be the Butillion. And I'll save you the Google search. A Butillion is a male's version of a debutante. So what we want to know is, okay, what is Jack's maximum and minimum spousal benefit off of Diane? Okay, based on the ages she claims her benefit. And as we see on the left, these are Diane's benefit based on the age she claims her own. In the middle, we're going to see Jack's minimum off of Diane, his spousal, and then Jack's max on the right, his spousal off of Diane at age 67. And as we can see, no matter what age Diane claims her own benefit, because we're basing Jack's spousal off of her full retirement age amount, that 10,000, the spousal off of Diane will always be based off that 10 grand and then what Jack's age is when he takes that benefit. Okay. And then remember those eligibility requirements. Your spouse, in this case, Diane, must also be taking hers for Jack to get one off of her. So let's throw an additional twist and say, well, what if what if Jack takes his benefit first and then Diane claims years later? What does Social Security do? They're going to top off with an excess spousal benefit, Jack's smaller amount, with Diane once she applies. And the way that works is exactly on your screen. They're going to take that higher amount, the initial amount that Jack is receiving. Then they're going to do the equation, which is the max spousal benefit, right? That full 50% of the amount, minus his full retirement benefit at full retirement age. And then whatever's left, add on top of what Jack's was getting before Diane claimed. Now, I know when I draw that out, I probably just lost half the room, right? So what we're going to do is go through another situation where this may or may not come into play. So this is our ABC hypothetical, our Alex, Blake, and Chris. And what we want to know is, what are they getting now, right? Because they're all 62, they're all retired, they're all taking their benefit. What are they getting now? And then what are they going to get once their spouse applies years later. So I'm going to populate all three scenarios at once. Okay. I know there's a lot on your screen. I don't want you to digest everything. I want you to just pay attention to the gray bars up top. Okay. Those gray bars for each situation is the math that we just did on the previous slide. And then the green is what they're getting after the spouse applies, and the blue is what they're going to start off with. So with Chris on the left, this is a traditional way we think spousal benefits, right? Chris, as you see, not available at top on the gray bar for his own benefit. So Chris's only benefit is available once his spouse applies. At that time, Chris is 67. He gets the full 50%, the $1,200. Okay. But if we jump to Blake, this is in the middle. This is probably closer to what people go through in the real world. And as we see, Blake starts at 62. So he's getting that 30% reduction to $700. Okay. Then we go 5 years fast forward. Blake's higher earner spouse applies. So we do the math in the gray bar. 1,200 minus 1,000 gives us $200, which we then additionally top off to what Blake was already getting, 700, to now getting 900 a month. Now, I didn't mention this in a previous slide, but if you take any benefit before you turn full retirement age, your benefits will be permanently reduced. And this is the proof in the pudding. Just because Blake turned his own benefit on early doesn't mean he gets the full 50% when his higher earner spouse applies. Even though he's 67 when that happens, because he took his own first, benefits permanently reduced, just getting a top off once his higher earner spouse applies. So instead of getting the 1,200, Blake goes to 900 a month. And then we look on Alex on the far right, very similar to how Blake started. But then when Alex's spouse applies, unfortunately for Alex, his spouse does not make as much as Blake's spouse. So Alex, as you see on the gray bar, 1,000 minus 1,000, 0. So Alex, even though we start the same as Blake, doesn't get a top off and just sticks with the 700 a month. So I want you to just take quickly a look at the three scenarios, see which one aligns to you most. And if you're looking at Blake in the middle and already trying to log on to both you and your spouse is account at the same time and whipping out the calculator, trying to do all your own math, I ask you not to focus on those interchangeables right now, right? It's to stress that your financial advisor, when you meet with them, can help you figure out the scenarios one way or another when it comes to you and your spouse. But it's to stress that your benefit should never be treated as strictly a me benefit. Okay. It should always be approached as a we benefit. So anytime you're meeting with your advisor, we stress at minimum when you are talking Social Security to have your statement and your spouse's statement. And if even possible, if you're divorced, your ex's statement, if they're willing to give it to you still. Now that's at minimum. Of course, we would like your actual spouse to be physically there with their statement so they can learn how their claiming decision impacts yours and vice versa. But it's to approach the planning as a we benefit and not a me benefit. And then we go on to survivor. As we additionally talk to the spousal benefit for married couples, you can also be eligible for a survivor benefit. So after traditionally the higher earner passing away, Social Security benefits will provide that surviving spouse the benefit. Now, why is it when we usually mention it just the higher earner passing is because remember, Social Security gives you just one benefit at a time and it's always the highest you're entitled to. So if it's the lower earner passing away, usually the higher earner will still be collecting their higher benefit. But if in the situation where they haven't turned their benefit on first, I'll get to that in a second, but you could start with one and switch to the other in the case of survivor. But to keep this uniform, we're going to start with eligibility first. So how do I know I'm eligible for a survivor benefit? Two major requirements. The first one, again, I'm sure everyone in the room can probably guess what that first requirement is, and it's you have had to have been married. But unlike spousal, where it's 1 year of marriage, survivor, you have had to have been married for at least 9 months if that person passed away, okay, to get it. And if the person, if you were divorced from that person, it's 10 consecutive years, okay? And we're going to address that 10 consecutive year metric quickly on the divorcee slide. Then the other requirement is you have to be age 60 or older, okay? Which again, like spousal, there are exceptions to which we can address in any questions. So then we worked out you're eligible for the survivor benefit. How do we then calculate that benefit? The benefit is going to be based on whatever the deceased was receiving at the time of death. And I could assume there might be a question there. Yes, that includes the additional 8% year over year if they waited to take their benefit and maximize it out. Okay. Now, if they didn't take their benefit and they passed away before full retirement age, that dollar amount immediately jumps up to whatever their full retirement age benefit would have been. Okay. Then it's very similar to spousal. You take that amount that they were receiving and then multiply it with the percentage that corresponds with the age that you see on your screen when you take that benefit. But there are major differences here when I want that I want to point out when it comes to survivor versus spousal. Okay. First one being, it might be obvious, but not a lot see the percentages. The max spousal, 50%, the max survivor, 100%. Okay. And then the other key one, which I mentioned briefly, but to give it a little bit more light, because I think it's a crucial point to hammer down when it comes to survivor benefits, is remember when I said you can't start with your own or the spousal and then switch? For survivor, you can. So in the situation where maybe the lower earner was the one to pass, if the higher earner didn't take their benefit yet, they can actually start with the survivor off of their deceased lower earning spouse while growing their own benefit and maximizing it out and then making that switch at the end. Okay. So you can switch when it comes to your own versus spousal, but for survivor, you can switch. Okay. Now, to better explain that jump up to 100%, this is a quick case study. Just pay attention to the amounts they're receiving and then the ages across the bottom. Okay. So we see they both take at 65, higher earners getting that 3125, lower earners getting the 1042. Fast forward 10 years later, they're both 75, higher earner passes away, lower earner, because they're full retirement age or older, they can now go from 1042 a month to the 3125, getting 100% of that benefit, right? So what that tells me is that the higher earner's decision to claim their own benefit not only is going to impact themselves, right? Remember, don't think me, think we. It's also going to impact their surviving spouse, right? And that's better looked at through another key goal slide, or our third key goal slide. Remember, first one was know your full retirement age. Second one is earnings test. This is our third one, because I feel like this slide really hammers home the impact of the higher earner's decision to take their own benefit. So in this example, let's just say blue and green are married. Okay. And for the sake of our argument, let's say blue took on the far left as soon as they could, 23,000 a year, and green took on the far right, right? They waited, they maximized theirs as much as they could, and they're getting 59,000 a year. If green were to kick the bucket, for the lack of better terms, blue could go from 23,000 a year all the way to 59,000 a year, as long as they're full retirement age or older. Now, let's pretend green took also as soon as they could at 62, getting 38,000 a year. That's going to now bear in mind the question, does an extra 21 grand a year make a difference to the surviving spouse? And where did I get the 21 grand from? Well, instead of blue going from 23 to 59, if green took also at 62, they're only going to go from 23 to 38 if the green were to pass away. So again, that emphasizes our decision to the higher earner. When you take your benefit, just know your benefit then becomes the survivor benefit. Okay. And I understand that maybe by taking your benefit at 70, right? And if you maybe perhaps pass away years after that, you might not be getting everything you can from Social Security. But by making that decision, it also means you're doing everything you can to protect your spouse financially. And that may be worth that decision alone. Okay. Now, we address spousal, survivor. Let's now address benefits if you ever ditch your spouse. Now, taking a look at the eligibility, right, to keep it uniform, how do I know I'm eligible for a benefit off of an ex? Two major rules there to be aware of. First one is that length of marriage rule, because I'm already going to guess everyone's aware that you had to have been married to get a divorcee benefit. But the first one is that length of marriage rule. And that is you have had to have been married to your ex for 10 consecutive years. Now, the way they count consecutive years is based on the calendar year. So the example there is, say I divorced my wife during Christmas time this year, because what a time to get a divorce. If I divorce in Christmas, we fall back in love by next summer, I better drop the knee and get remarried according to the city of Boston by Christmas next year, or else 2026 will not count as a consecutive year according to our marriage record. Okay. Then, after we figured out the 10 consecutive year rule, there's something called the 2-year rule. And the 2-year rule says that if your divorce was within the last 2 years, you do need your ex to be taking their benefit to get one off of them. Okay. But if it's been beyond 2 years, you don't need to wait. Okay. You can just file. Social Security is not going to check if they're getting theirs. You're going to get it. Okay. And then, similar to the way we discussed the other benefit, which is you have to be 62 or older, and it is also calculated the exact same way we calculated the spousal benefit. But what I really want to hammer down to any divorcees on the call, or dare I say future divorcees, again, you talk a lot of morbid scenarios when you talk Social Security enough, but what trips up a lot of people are the remarry rules. And as a general rule, if you remarry, you're going to forfeit the benefits off of the ex. Okay. But there's two major exceptions there. The first one is if you remarry after you turn 60, then you can retain the survivor benefit off of that ex. Okay. So the example is there, you had a 10 consecutive year marriage, you got divorced, you're 58 years old, you just fell in new love. Especially if your new love makes less money than your first spouse, you may want to wait to drop that knee until you hit age 60. That way you can retain that big fat, dare I say, survivor benefit off of that first marriage. Okay. And then the second exception is if that second marriage then ends, and that can be through death, annulment, or divorce, then you can also be re-entitled to the benefits off the first marriage. Now, that exception sometimes throws people into a loop because people start thinking of all the ways they can take advantage of their previous marriages. So to give that better light here, we have Jane Fonda, who has set herself up better than anyone I can think of for Social Security. So Jane was married to both Tom Hayden and Ted Turner, or shown as Theo on your screen. Both ended in divorce. Both lasted 10 consecutive years. And for Jane, her option is whatever's largest between her own benefit, the survivor off Tom Hayden since he's passed away, or the spousal off of Ted Turner because he's still alive. And then when Ted passes away, she could potentially switch to the survivor off him if it's any higher than the current benefits. Okay. So hopefully that clears up all those examples that people are running through on how they can take advantage of previous marriages. And then lastly, because I'm no CPA, we're going to quickly run through, just kidding. We're going to talk about taxes and the roles that those play within your Social Security benefit. Now, to start off, regardless of your age, once you start taking your benefits may be taxable if your income exceeds $25,000 for individuals, or $32,000 if you're filing married jointly. Now, the good thing is, and it's very rare that you could say there's any good things when you talk taxes, is when you're talking taxes on Social Security benefits, currently, they are not 100% taxable. And I think even right now, the current administration is finding ways, or trying to find ways, to help reduce the taxes on your benefit as well. Now, those changes have to be done through a major congressional act. We're not going to get into the bureaucracy of it all. But currently, your benefits are not 100% taxable. So the administration does provide at least that 15% cushion, right? As you see, the highest number on your screen is 85%. So that 15% cushion to what is owed to Uncle Sam. Now, however, I do get it, right? It's frustrating. You spent your whole life paying into the program, and now, of course, it's being taxed on the way out. However, the way I like to explain this, or at least teach it, is the way I like to explain any tax situation. And that is use the G.I. Joe approach. What is the G.I. Joe approach? Is knowledge is half your battle. And if you know what goes into your taxable equations, then it allows you to play defense, right? So what is the taxable equation for Social Security? It's on your screen. They call it combined income. And that's what the government uses to determine how much of your Social Security is going to be added to your income and then thus become taxable. So what they do is they take your adjusted gross income, They add your tax-exempt income. They then add half of your Social Security benefits, and that is what is equal to your combined income. Now, there are lots of investment vehicles that Gina and that team is going to know way more than we do about that is not included in this combined income equation. And it's important to be aware of what those vehicles are, because if you can rely maybe on some of those instead of Social Security while letting your benefits grow, then you can use that method to help play defense when it comes to your post-retirement income. What do I mean by all that? Here is a quick hypothetical to help detail by letting Social Security grow, how we can let you play some defense on those taxable liabilities. So this here looks at a couple, right? They're retired. They have an after-tax income goal of 75,000, and they're looking at that decision of before or after, or excuse me, taking it at 62 on the left or 70 on the right. Okay. Now, this is our fourth key gold slide, but full disclosure, this is a perfect hypothetical. It is meant to emphasize that by letting Social Security grow, it can help you with your tax liability. What it's not meant to tell you is if it's even remotely possible, because if it was, I'd be copy pasting this out to everyone I knew. If it's even remotely possible to reduce your federal income tax liability to zero just by letting Social Security grow. Okay, so that's not the message we want to get across with the slide. We just want to let you know that by letting it grow and using other vehicles, it can help you play defense. And what I mean by that is by looking at this situation, if they're taking at 70 versus 62, that we can see on that first line, they're getting more of that after-tax income for their 75K from Social Security, which means that on the second row, they're withdrawing less from their tax-deferred accounts, right? Which means that on the third row, their total combined income equation is reduced, which then as we work our way continuing down, it continues to reduce how much of Social Security is taxable, how much of their adjusted gross income becomes taxable, and then reducing it after the standard deduction down to a lower liability. Okay. Anybody's taxable equation like this, it is always a good idea to have a discussion with a qualified tax professional and involve those withdrawals from tax deferred accounts with your financial advisor. Now, remember, I just briefly mentioned some of those vehicles not included in that combined income equation. Some of those examples are on your screen. I don't want to go box by box here because we'll be here all day long. But I do want to quickly note Roth IRA. Anybody that has the ability through the employer to have a Roth 401k or separately on your own a Roth IRA, we always consider contributions into vehicles like that because having a Roth may give you some of the most flexibility to control those taxes in retirement. And then secondly, for HSA, just know that if you turn your Social Security on at age 65, or once you hit age 65 and you turn your benefit on, you cannot refuse Medicare Part A. So if you do have an HSA, know that you become ineligible once you're in Medicare Part A, and you could be penalized for contributing to an individual HSA if you are on Medicare Part A. And then before we hit our last and final slide, just to briefly detail some of those Medicare premiums, what I do want to note is why do we talk Medicare premiums when we talk Social Security? Well, because once you're eligible, the premiums are actually taken from your Social Security check before they hit your mailbox or your bank account. So it's important that we know what is your Medicare premium breakdown and the actual amount taken from your checks. I do want to briefly point out the bolded in the bottom right. Your premiums are based off of your monthly adjusted gross income from 2 years prior. So for those of you that perhaps may be planning on selling a major asset to help fund your fund in retirement, know, of course, the tax consequent in the given year that you sell that asset, but then also your Medicare premiums 2 years down the road. There is a form that you can file to SSA to adjust your premiums on current year income, but there are strict reasons to file that form. Retirement is one. Selling a major asset is not. So just something to be aware of. And then last note about me, Medicare premiums that I want to mention is what we call the premium trap or the widow premium trap. And that is better explained through a hypothetical. Me and my wife are married, right? We file jointly at 210,000 a year. We're just under, right, that first bracket. So we're in the top row. I make 150, she makes 60 a year. My wife passes away. I file the next year individual at 150, my same income. If you notice, individual at 150 puts me now in the third row, which means it doubles my personal premium. So just something to be aware of. And then lastly, which I thank everyone for sticking with us, because there's a lot of information that's needed to be digested on these slides that we went over. But is it reality that you're going to digest all that information? Absolutely not, right? But we, of course, want you to leave today's call with some of the best takeaways that are going to help you prepare your benefit, right? And this is why it's our fifth and final key gold slide, because I think it measures out some of those key takeaways to help with your planning. So the first questions we ask when you're planning is, especially if you're under full retirement age, are you working? And how long do you plan on working? Because we feel like it's not justifiable to turn your benefit on if you're working, ultimately just to see your benefits withheld from you. Secondly, what's your withdrawal rate? Sit down with your advisor team, understand how your outside accounts are going to play into your withdrawal rate in retirement. And if that means letting Social Security grow, all for it. Thirdly, life expectancy, right? We really only ask this question if you're single. So if you're single, approach your financial advisor, have them understand what your personal and family health concerns are. And of course, if you're in good health and have good family health, best to let it grow as much as you can, that your outside assets allow you to. And then why don't we talk life expectancy to married couples is because data tells us that there's a 50% chance that one of two of the spouses are going to live until age 90. So our general rule of thumb for married couples is lower earner, take whenever you want, or necessarily when you need it. For the higher earner, stress to try to grow and maximize that higher benefit. And that's because the individual with the higher earner benefit becomes the survivor benefit if they were to pass. Okay. And that's how you're ultimately going to get the most out of Social Security over both of your lives, by growing that higher earner benefit. Now, again, thank you for everyone for sticking with us. I know that can seem like a drag on a topic as complicated as Social Security, especially with some of the topic points that may not be applicable to everyone on the call. The one thing that we did not go over, which I don't think I'd be doing my job if we didn't at least mention, was the Fairness Act that happened at the start of the year. Why don't I mention it? Is because in reality, it only affects 3% of the population taking their benefit. And if anyone has questions on that, I'd be more than happy to spend more time going over the Fairness Act. And if you want to know if perhaps you were affected or your spouse was affected, know that it has to do with public institutions and public entities. So if you or your spouse worked for any entities like public schools or municipality entities like police, first responders, firefighters, anything like that, and you didn't pay into Social Security while working for those entities, hit myself or Gina up after the call or in questions, and we can let you know if you were duly impacted by that act. But with that, Gina, I will shut up and see if we have questions.
Great job, Zach. Yes, continue to put your questions in the Q&A. I know Jack is answering those. Let's just talk about resources available. This deck will be available. Am I correct to say that, Zach? We've got this deck is available.
I have a bunch of slides that we go through in questions. I just wanted to get to this so that people know what's up next. But yes, we have a full reference guide that not only had pretty much every image that you saw on your screen today, but also the additional context that I would traditionally provide. So that is absolutely accessible. Gina, I'll make sure you have that along with all of our specific FAQs that deal with individual scenarios as well.
Yes, thank you. And actually, what we're going to do, again, the recording is available to you. It will be available. You'll get the recorded link or you'll find it on our website. We're also going to put those resources on our website as well, too. So again, those FAQs, the deck, all of this information, a lot of the things Zach covered today, you're going to have those references. Again, you can reach out to our team if you have, if you think of other questions. If we don't know the answer, we have Zach and Jack as fantastic resources. We can always reach out to them. But again, we're going to make sure you have a lot of resources. I think that's so critical right now. I know I've talked to people who tried to connect with a live person at the Social Security Administration, and it's really tough right now. So
Absolutely.
we're trying to get as many resources in your hands as we possibly can. So
Yeah.
so look for that information. Also, I know Zach touched on Medicare. There are some obviously Social Security and Medicare to some degree are a little bit entwined. We're going to be talking about Medicare in a presentation on August 21st. We have some other great webinars coming up there for participants and also for retirement plan sponsors as well. So you can register for those on that QR code, or again, you can go to our website um, and register there as well. So yeah, anything else to add,
Yeah,
Zach?
so I will say you did mention contacting Social Security themselves. So we do some third-party data collecting out there on like best times to call Social Security. It's not a perfect system, but if I could make a recommendation, my advice is to try always on Mondays and Tuesdays and within the first hour of the office line opening up.
Good advice.
Anytime you get past like the 9:30 a.m. Time, you're going to put yourself in a backlog of holding, on the hold. But I also know that just last year they did change up their phone policy to give a callback prompt. And I don't know exactly when that's hit. It could be at like, the 30 or 45-minute hold. Once you hit that time on hold, they say, hey, press one if you'd like us to call you back. I did get feedback that it is pretty reliable, that people did get called back within the same day,
Okay.
which is promising after hearing
Yeah.
horror stories of people saying that they were on hold for like 4 to 6 hours in the same
Oh
day,
gosh.
which is just way too long to have that elevator music on speakerphone. So,
Right.
so yeah, that and in office appointments. Just know that if you're filing for a survivor benefit or a disability benefit, those typically do have to be done in person at an office. Survivor, definitely. Disability, we just recommend. Um, Average wait times, depending on where you're at, can be anywhere between a month and a half to 3 months. So I would definitely get on if you're looking to find information within a short period of time, or maybe, hey, my full retirement age is approaching within 6 months. Probably a good idea to get on a radar of a potential in-person meeting for that, just to make sure you have everything squared away. There is an office locator online. So if you just Google SSA office locator, it'll bring you right to their company site. Type in your zip code, it'll tell you what office, your local office to book your appointment at. I stress that because I've heard of scenarios where people book an appointment on vacation or like during Christmas at a loved one's home. And ultimately they got turned away because they're like, this is not your assigned local office. We really can't help you. That's not always the case, but I hear stories like that. So try to book your appointment at your assigned office, and just know those wait times kind of going in. So you're not surprised or sticker shocked at, oh man, 3 months is a really long time to wait.
Right. And Zach, quick follow-up question to that. I know there's an
Yeah,
800 number that people can call, just a generic 800 number that people can call to schedule the in-person appointment. But it
yeah,
sounds like you're saying if you're going to schedule that, look on the locator, find the office closest to you, and maybe call that office directly.
correct.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my
So
recommendation.
that is a great start. So
Yeah,
thank
because
you.
when you go through just the 1-800, you're
Yeah.
kind of put into a pool and you can, I mean, think about it. It's very similar to how if you were running a business, if somebody called me direct and say like booked a hotel with my hotel direct, it's better than booking it through Kayak, right? Or
Right.
one of those things. I talk about it similarly to that.
Yep.
Is they look at it as just, hey, an appointment through SSA, whereas if you make it through the direct office, they have, they can pull prior information on you, they kind of
Right.
lead up and all that. So it's definitely better to find your office first, try to call them direct.
Awesome. Great suggestion there.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. Jack, how are you doing I know you're on mute. You're very diligently answering a lot of questions. How you doing there? Any popular questions that were coming up?
there's a few questions around the divorce situation, which I know Zach went over it, so kind of went through answering some of those. A few that were asked before our call that luckily people did come back and answer live or ask live that I've been answering, but I think a lot of this is around what is going to happen depending on the age that I'm taking benefits, and a lot of, what's best for me. And while that is a very good question, I do want to kind of say, there is no perfect age to take benefits. This
Yeah.
really all comes down to a conversation between you and your financial planner or your financial advisor. It's just understanding your situation, and hopefully we can provide what options are available to you.
Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If I could give some data at you too, just kind of helping the planning of it and the influence of planning for your benefit and how important that is I know throughout the presentation I mentioned, I don't know what advisor on this planet could, if you approach them at 62 and said, I'm taking my benefit, help me prepare, that they could do anything for you at that time. And to kind of back that up is we do surveys every year where we survey current retirees taking their benefit, but also future retirees planning to take their benefit. And when we ask those planning on taking their benefit, what do you expect Social Security to make up in your post-retirement income percentage wise? It seems like they just copy paste from SSA and they say 33%, right? Which is that classical one of the three-legged stool of your post-retirement income being Social Security. But then when we get survey results back from current retirees taking it, their answer says, when we ask current retirees, we say how much of Social Security is actually your post-retirement income, and it's anywhere between 41 to 49%. And what that tells me is one, the emphasis on learning how to maximize your benefit because it actually is making up more of post-retirement than what advice is saying it should. Advice on maximizing your benefit is crucial, right? But also the preparedness. We don't know if 41 to 49% is because they didn't educate themselves on how to maximize it, or if it's because they didn't prepare all their other outside accounts for that decision, right? So that's why we stress, because of that, it's important to meet with your advisor personally between the ages of 50 to 55 to give them a good 10-year run on helping prepare for that decision when that comes, so that if there's things that have to be done with your IRAs, your 401ks, your pensions, whatever it is to help make that decision and budget it out more appropriately, that's why we advise that 5-year period crucial to meet with the advisor to help plan. So to Jack's point, there is really no perfect answer. The perfect answer is meet with your advisor with a 10-year run so that they can give you the perfect answer.
Right, right. Great advice.
Yeah.
Jack, I'm just going to throw out a question that came in through the chat instead of the Q&A. And I do think this was one that I think we may have touched on, but it's great question. Definitely worth reiterating. My husband and I are both planning to retire at full retirement age at the end of July 2026, so a year from now. I heard you need to request Social Security benefits 3 months prior to retirement date. What is the recommended time to request Social Security benefits? So when you're coming up on that full retirement age, can you answer that?
Yeah, so you actually can go into the application for your benefits and actually select which month you'd like to start receiving benefits, and based upon whatever age you are at that time is going to reflect whatever benefit it is at that time. So as we mentioned, if you go ahead right away, when you turn 67 and when you both want to be retired and start taking benefits, you can go in and put that application in. You might not see the benefit payments yet, but as long as you are applying on that date and you wish to receive them on that date, they can provide that back pay. But it is
Yeah.
recommended that you do apply a little bit sooner and just select which date that you wish to start receiving those benefits.
Okay. So do you have
Yeah.
any
And I believe,
recommended time frame? Like, would you say like 60 days, 90 days before you want the benefit? Do you have any kind of recommendation on when you should apply?
I typically say look about 3 months out. I'm not sure if
Okay.
Zach's
yeah.
any different
Okay.
on
I,
that.
I would agree. And Jack, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they allow that plus or minus 6 month window. So
Yeah.
like even up to 6 months before you turn full retirement age, you can file and say, my intended month to collect my benefit is this month. And that can be 6 months post
Okay.
when you
Perfect.
file. So
Good
that
to know.
when you turn full retirement age, if you're a huge planner like I am, right, and almost OCD towards it, yeah, you can do that really prior and post date it. And then when you hit full retirement age, that month following,
You
you're
know
going to
it's
get
coming.
that first check. But for those that maybe don't have access to an advisor or a resource to help educate, I think they allow the pre-date of 6 months as well. So even if I'm after full retirement age, and maybe if I'm 6 months after retirement age, I'm like, hey, it's not bad. I'm actually growing it because I forgot to take it. But if you meant to take it, you can actually predate the 6 month. They'll lump sum you out to make you whole and then continue monthly after.
Okay, awesome.
Maybe one question that I'll bring up, just because I've gotten a few on it already, actually.
But just before, Jack, sorry, I
Yeah.
apologize. I do have to jump for another seminar. The one thing I do want to tell the audience as well before I do is when I do jump, my screen's going to go away. We don't stop being a resource. I know we allotted the hour here for us, but just because we end here doesn't mean we stop being a resource. So if questions arise an hour from now, later tonight, next week, bubble them up to Gina. Gina will flood our inbox. We'll get those answers back.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right.
Thank you. And I think
Thanks, Zach.
Yep. Thank you, Zach. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, you bet. So
Yeah.
Jack and I, we're gonna stay on. So I know Jack, you were saying there were a couple popular questions.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to answer the questions that are in here, but a few that did pop up were just kind of how benefits that your former spouse is taking off of your record, does that affect your benefits? It doesn't at all. I think Zach covered a little bit, but just to clarify that when your former spouse goes to take benefits off your record, it's almost like it's a completely separate benefit. Because Social Security, they don't want you to have to speak with your former spouse in order to figure out benefits and everything. They don't need you to be in contact with them. As long as they know how old you are or you know how old they are, you can start to receive information from Social Security, but it's not going to affect your benefits in any way. It doesn't dilute somebody else's benefit, not taking away. It's like it's completely separate. So just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
Yeah, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, and again, one of the frequently asked question flyers that we're going to put on our website, it is specific to divorced individuals. So that's we also have a frequently asked question on survivor benefits. So they're really easy to understand, but those just kind of a nice way to hone in on your particular situation. Again, we'll have that right on our website along with the recording to this webinar too.
Fantastic. One other thing that I think I've gotten a couple questions on this as well, just to kind of go over this live, is what happens with spousal benefits. So just to clarify, spousal benefits are always going to be based upon the person with the higher benefits full retirement age benefit. Their PIA or primary insurance amount, it's always going to be based off of that number. So say somebody is age 70, they start taking benefits, they get that growth, that extra 24, 32%, however old that full retirement age is. It's not going to be based upon what you're receiving then. It's going to be based upon what it was at your full retirement age. So if your spouse is looking to receive that, maybe 50% of that, just be aware that it's not going to be 50% of what you're receiving now, but what it was at your full retirement age.
Got it. So if I start collecting, if I'm the higher earning spouse in my marriage, and I delay, take it at age 70, and then I pass away, my survivor benefit, my spouse would get the benefit, half the benefit at age 67, which would be my full retirement age. Did I say that right?
So survivor benefits are different. So
Yeah.
for spousal benefits, let's say you were turning age 70 and you started taking your age 70 benefit with that growth, and your spouse then applied for the spousal benefit. As long as they are full retirement age or older, they'll receive that 50%.
Got it.
But it's going to be based upon the full retirement age benefit, not your age 70 benefit.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. I accidentally said I said survivor.
No worries. But for the survivor benefit, if let's say you decide, let's wait till age 70, let's maximize my benefit. Later on down the road, unfortunately, something happens and your spouse wants to receive survivor benefits. They can receive 100% of that age 70 benefit.
Yep.
So that's where that comes into play. And that's why I always tell people to really consider maybe looking to maximize benefits to increase that survivor benefit.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. I know those scenarios are a little bit confusing, but thanks. It's just good to talk that out a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, like I said, Zach, or Jack, Jack, your name's confused. I'll let you continue to, I'll address a couple of questions too that I see in the Q&A. But I'll let you continue to answer if there's more in there. Somebody asked, can you recommend a good financial advisor? Yes, we can. Just to clarify, everyone on our team, Jessica, Jenna, Virginia, and myself, we are all licensed financial advisors. We are specifically retirement plan advisors. So we don't work with people individually. We can be your resource. You can sign up for a one-on-one with us. We're happy to answer any questions about Social Security that we can, or provide you with the resources that you need. So we're a good starting point, but we don't work with individuals. So I know we mentioned many times that having a good financial advisor to help you guide through some of these questions is really important. We do work with some really great financial advisors in the Twin Cities, and happy to give you, a couple of recommendations and let you choose. So we would be happy to do that if you're looking for an individual financial advisor, to work with on, a long-term basis. So great question. All right. Well, if I will just say, in closing, I know we still have a number of people still on. If you still have questions, continue to put those through the Q&A. Again, Jack and I will stay till we get all those answered. But thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Again, look for more resources on this topic. I know it's a very important topic to many, many Americans. We'll have lots of resources available to you. Again, you can always send those questions to us. Yes.
Should I go over any of the questions that were sent over prior?
Let's see. Are there any questions that were submitted to you that we didn't answer?
Trying to look and see if there's anything different from what we've talked about. Obviously there's some on, what's going to happen to Social Security. I think Zach addressed that all. The one of them though was, what has changed with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Just wanted to address there was no changes to Social Security, in that there was some tax changes as far as senior deductions and the SALT tax, which could impact your taxes and could possibly lower the amount of tax that you're paying in retirement, but this has no impact on Social Security or your Social Security benefits. Nothing was changed. I know some of the talks were about taking away taxes on Social Security. That did not pass through, so there were no changes at all, in case anybody was worried or wondering about that.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And likewise, there were no changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill that directly impacted retirement savings either. So there was no changes to, contribution limits, anything that, we've made a lot of progress with retirement plan legislation, and fortunately, the One Big Beautiful Bill did not make any changes to retirement savings. So that's very positive. But
Yeah,
again, I think, we talked about it at the beginning of the hour. You're going to hear more about Social Security in, some of the upcoming elections, particularly the 2028 presidential election, also the 2030. So, I mean, again, we have to come up with some resolution, and, could be like some of the Reagan era changes. Maybe they're small, maybe they're incremental, but obviously it is important, to retain the solvency of the Social Security Administration. So there will be more.
What I would mention is that there was a few folks that said I'm nowhere near retirement in general. I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, or even I'm in my 40s. Why is this important? What should I consider about Social Security? To that, I would say it's important to understand the way Social Security benefits work. So that way you can understand what goes towards, your benefit in general, those 35 highest average that goes into calculating your retirement benefits, understanding that you do need to pay in for 40 quarters. But besides that, just know that, just pay attention to what happens. And I wouldn't necessarily say to the headlines that you might see in the news, but what actually happens and changes in Social Security, because that's going to affect what happens to benefits down the road. But this is going to give you ample time to understand that Social Security might not be able to cover all of your retirement. You really should not consider Social Security to be all of your income in retirement. So just understand that you have plenty of time to plan and save more for retirement, so that way you can supplement that.
Right, exactly. And I might add to that, I tell people, I don't care how old you are, log into ssa.gov.
Yes.
There, secure your account, set up your username and password. Obviously, the data is going to change every year. You're going to have a different income. It's going to recalculate. But number one, I think it's important to protect your Social Security account. When you put just like any financial account, when you put your cell phone number and your email address in there, that's critical, I think, to protect your account. So set up your account, look at your data, make sure it's correct. Know it's going to change, but I think it is really important to log in and set up an account at SSA regardless of how old you are. So remember to try to do that. But yeah, to Zach's point, we talk to young people, in their 20s and 30s every single day. And I know there is a common consensus. Well, I'm worried Social Security is not going to be around at all. I do feel that it's probably going to be around in some way, shape, or form, but it may not provide the same level of benefits it did to you, to your parents or your grandparents. So plan accordingly. Make sure you're saving 10 to 15% towards retirement. If you can't do that, save as much as you can, save to your company match, and gradually increase it over time. You can start out in baby steps. If you start when you're young, you have the power of compoundings. But I definitely think it's important just to know that it is a benefit that is not going to provide you with all the income that you're going to need. So. Any other questions that you have in there, Jack, or do you think we answered everything?
I think we mostly covered everything. I think there was a few questions about, what is the current full retirement age, and has there been any changes to that? They have not announced any sort of changes to the full retirement age. Anybody that was born in 1960 or after, that full retirement age is going to be 67. That has not changed yet. So nothing there. As far as anything else, I think there was a question on, if I move to a different country, am I still going to be able to get my benefits? I answered that in the chat earlier. There's a site from SSA called the Foreign Payments Abroad, or the Payments Abroad tool, where you can check. It's basically checking to make sure the trade agreement with the United States is in place, that they can send payments abroad. So in case you are considering moving somewhere, just check to ensure that your payments can be sent to where you are looking to move to.
Good advice. Very good. Good to know.
And I think that might be the majority of it. Others might not be necessarily Social Security related, and I'll pass those along to you, Gina. But
Okay.
But yeah, if there's anything else, if anybody has a question or a topic of Social Security that wasn't covered, feel free to just send a quick note in the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you always have us as a resource. Don't forget 401k plan professionals. You can always reach out to our team. We can schedule a one-on-one with you, answer as many questions as we can, provide you with those resources. So definitely encourage you to do that. Also, don't forget, we are doing the Medicare presentation. That's on August 21st. So again, you can register on our website for that. Also, very, very important benefit too. So. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate all of your time, your questions. I know Zach already left, but Jack, on behalf of our team, we really appreciate this. You guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you all as well.